When I was 10, I realized I was black, what blackness meant. Learned from the experience of trying to force myself into this pristine, white, and coveted space, which spotted me out before I could realize how much I had been abused. There might have been incidents when I was called ugly or rejected by some guy whom I basically didn't know but was infatuated with nevertheless. But that's all they were. Incidents, moments. They're not experiences that defined my childhood, or me. In the 1940s, there was a study where they took 4 dolls of different colors and put them in front of children. And when asked which doll they liked more, the lighter colored dolls were chosen, while the darker ones, not so much. This shows that the discrimination shown towards African American children lower their self-esteem. Morgan Jenkins tells her story of growing up as an African American girl in her memoir, This Is My Undoing, by Morgan Jenkins. Cheerleading tryouts for elementary school were underway. I was one of only 4 black girls in a room full of about 30 white girls. The others were Tanya, a second-generation Jamaican American, Ruby, whose name matched her beauty, and an Afro-Latina whose name eludes me now. There were no Asians, no Pacific Islanders, no Native Americans. If you were to blink, you might have missed us 4 black girls there. The cafeteria was large, and the whiteness was blinding. The judges were the cheerleading coaches, those who also taught us all the vocabulary, jumps, and dance routines. My mother and I held hands to pray that God would hold my fear at bay. I knew the dance steps. I'd practiced them on the way to the bus stop. My smile was congealed on my face. I was excited when my moment began. My confidence was so overwhelming, so filling, that I refused to touch any of the food or drink before it was my turn. Hours passed as we waited for the results. The cafeteria doors opened. But this time, the judges came out. Rather than inviting girls in, the entire hallway was silent. I could hear my heart beating in my chest and an incessant ringing in my ear. They called names one by one. White, 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 white. I blinked, and a tear rolled down my cheek. One became several. My mother spoke with Tanya's mother, and they deliberated going to the astronomation to talk about this. I didn't know what this meant. I couldn't help but think that there was something terribly wrong. Not with the judges, but with me. Maybe I didn't smile enough. Maybe I was too fat. Maybe I wasn't beautiful. That had to be it, because I was not a cheerleader. I felt like I was silenced to eternal ugliness. I got over the results in a few days. There was another kind of drama unraveling in my life. One of my closest neighborhood friends and I were fighting. Their internet just started getting popular. More of our fighting happened over the phone rather than in person. We might have typed curse words to each other, talked about each other's hair and clothes, but there was one comment that brought my fingers to a standstill. Do you know why you didn't make the cheerleading squad, Morgan? It's because they don't accept monkeys like you on the team. There's no amount of practice or smiling that could obscure the inescapable problem of me being a black girl. Did those white girls look at me as a monkey who had to be treated with artificial cordiality so that I wouldn't act wild or aggressive? Did I transform into the character of a monkey when I performed in front of those white women, subtly begging for their acceptance without questioning it? Suddenly, I understood more about race than I ever had before. I'm not human. When I started 8th grade in Williams Middle School, immediately I befriended and latched onto a Colombian named Katrine, one of only a handful of Latinx who attended my school. She showed me the ropes and was in many of my classes. As she shuffled me along different hallways, the black boys did double takes, sometimes going as far as impeding our paths just to introduce themselves to us. I was the new girl, and in a small town, any novelty was exciting. Lunch came around, and I was informed through whisperers that I was fine. The speed at which a teenager's tongue moves could compete with the speed of light. Katrine didn't ask me about where I moved from, how many siblings I had, or what music I liked. Instead, she would pass notes to me in class, asking me if I had a boyfriend or whether or not I was a virgin. This paled in comparison to the harassment I'd experienced from a new student in the following year. Even in middle school, the black female body was always a target for discrimination. Violence was a legitimate way to resolve arguments. Talking was not a conclusion, but rather a trigger. You fought someone who talked badly about you, or someone who wanted your man. In other words, you fought to maintain your space in an environment where your space is already in the margins. For what black girl wants to be even more invisible than she thinks she already is, fighting was a way to assert that you were present and in motion. Fighting brought you the respect that institutions refused to give you. Belonging to the world of a black woman demands strength, on your feet, wit, and aggression, because space for and by ourselves is small. The desire to be a cheerleader while being seen as a monkey. The strain to be passive over the demand to be aggressive. The bullying, the conflict, all of this takes place in the battlegrounds of being born both black and female. We cannot afford to believe that any part of ourselves gives us an edge over another. Ultimately, we are all fighting. I intend to fight those who are on the other side and those who are on the inside who are just as victimized as I am. I cannot divorce either part of my identity, and I recognize now, as I excavate my most painful memories, that to do so would to underestimate their impact on my psychology. It's true that we are all victims within a partial society, and we must fight. But the fight to empower all women under the veil of feminism has historically and presently centered white women. The word all switches to whiteness. As this default, this is also why I write. When black women speak about themselves to those who are not black, somehow our intellectors get offended that we dare speak about how both race and gender affects us. Our blackness does not distance us from other women. However, it does distinguish us, and this requires further understanding. At the same time, my story is not a one-size-fits-all about black womanhood. We deserve to be in the center. Our expansive stories are worth being magnified for their own ugliness, beauty, mundaneness, and grandeur. I will not baby you. Instead, I will force you to keep your eyes on me, and in turn us, and see the seams of everyday life that you have been privileged to ignore, but that have wrecked us. Some of us are still wrecked. I am undoubtedly so, in some ways, which you will know about soon enough. But in many other ways, our community has been strengthened, and that's why I am here, and you are continuing to read my words. And to that I say, welcome. Let us begin.